All right, here is a helper video for composing and decomposing functions. Nobody has asked for help on the first part, so I'm going to skip that, but people have asked for help on the second part, so I am going to talk about this. So what we want to do is we want to kind of go backwards from what we were doing on the top part. In the top part, we were putting one function inside of the other. So we were told to put g of x inside of f of x. So we were taking g of x and replacing the x over here, and we got x plus 1, and then that's squared because we replaced the x here with the x plus 1. All right, so what we want to do is we want to figure out if this is the answer, what was the f of x and what was the g of x? Sorry, there we go. If this is the answer to a composition problem, what were the two original functions? So as you can see in this problem here, what's inside the parentheses is the g of x, and what's outside the parentheses was the f of x. So that's kind of what we're doing here. So I want to find out what's f of x and what's g of x. So pretty much it's what's inside the parentheses is your g of x. So g of x is 3x squared minus 2. And so this, if I get rid of that, if I cover it up and just say what could be under there, well, it could just be an x. That's my f of x. F of x is equal to x to the fourth. And then you can test it by thinking, okay, if I put g of x inside of f of x, because that's what it's asking for up here, put g of x inside of function f. If I plug this in where the x is, do I get that? And the answer there is yes. Okay, so same thing here. I can take all of this and I can call that my g of x. So I have g of x is equal to x squared minus 2x plus 7. And instead of having that, just imagine it's just an x. I'll let you finish that off. Okay? All right, the ones that get tricky are this one and this one. These are kind of the tricky ones. So a lot of people were like completely stuck on this one, and they just did kind of silly things. But if I'm looking for what's inside of what, I'm seeing I have an x to the fourth and an x squared. I usually don't have that in a trinomial. Normally in a trinomial I have an x squared and an x. So if this is normally an x, that means that my g of x is x squared. So I'm going to let g of x be equal to x squared because that's kind of more normal. That's what we expect. When we see a trinomial, we expect this term to have an x squared, this term to have an x. Okay, so if x squared is my g of x, well, how many x squareds does it take to get an x to the fourth? Well, it takes 2 of them. So this would be for my, what am I doing? F of x. My f of x would be 6 and then x squared, because if I replace the x with this x squared, I'd end up with x to the fourth. So then minus 3x and plus 1. Okay, and then I can test it. I can say, all right, if I put this in here and here, would it end up giving me that? And the answer is yes, it would. Okay, so this one, it kind of helps if you know what does cosine squared x mean. Cosine squared x, when you see this notation, that means cosine of x squared. So I have cosine of squared x minus, I'm going to put this in parentheses, cosine of x plus 5. So I just rewrote it. This is still my h of x. So notice I have something squared minus something plus 5. Hey, kind of looks like a trinomial, 3 pieces here. So what's different about this, though, than this trinomial is instead of having x squared and x, it's got this cosine x. Oh, so let's get rid of the cosine x. So my g of x, the thing in the parentheses, is cosine of x. So if I replace cosine of x, if I take those out, and just think of those as x, I have x squared minus x plus 5. So my f of x is equal to x squared minus x plus 5. And if I were to substitute back in cosine of x into both of those x's, I would get this. Okay, I'll let you do the rest without me. There's only 2 more, really, and to finish that one to go. So pretty much, though, when you're thinking about these decomposition problems, think about, what does this remind you of? What does the structure remind you of? When you have 3 terms and one of them has a squared on it, that should remind you of a trinomial. Okay, again, I had 3 terms here. It looks like a trinomial, but what's different about it? And then that's what we're getting at for trying to do the decomposition. What does it remind you of, and how can we rewrite it as 2 functions so that you get those functions that look familiar? Okay? I hope that helps. Bye-bye.